Okay, so you want to buy land. Welcome to the club. I've wanted to own rural land since I was in college. And it took me quite a bit of time, a number of years, before I was really able to afford it. But I've been fortunate enough to be able to buy and sell several places now. And I've been able to walk through several transactions with buyers and sellers as a land agent. And I love every minute of it. If you're watching this video, you can probably relate. And at some level, you're probably interested in actually buying some land, whether it's now or even a little down the road. Either way, there's a lot of things to understand and even prepare for. Because buying rural land isn't like buying a house in a suburban neighborhood. There's a lot of nuances and differences in the transaction itself. But don't worry, because in this video, I explain the full process to buying rural property. Like I said, I've gone through this process many times personally and with my clients. And oh, how do I wish I would have seen this video before I started the process. It seems like everywhere I went, I would get answers to questions, but people would only paint a small piece of the picture for me. I would get answers about the survey or about a title, but I could never really get anybody to put the big picture together for me. Well, my friends, this video is to help you fill in some of the gaps and to help manage your expectations for when you start the process to understand the full process. Welcome to Landowner TV, where I make you smarter about your land one video at a time. My name is Morrow, and on this channel, I cover questions that landowners frequently have questions about. Questions about wildlife or conservation or livestock, sometimes hunting, and sometimes about real estate transactions, just like this video. So if you're a landowner or just enjoy learning about land in general, mostly in Texas, be sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you like the video, it would mean a lot for me if you hit that like button. So I cover this in about 7 steps. There's all kinds of ways to slice the pie, but this is the way that mentally I did. Step 1, I would say, is securing financing. And no, I am not confused. When you're ready to make that plunge, I definitely want you to do this as your first step. Okay. And if you're one of those really lucky people that gets to pay cash for land, you get to go ahead and skip to step 2. For the rest of us who do typically run through some financing process, pay attention. Now the truth is you don't necessarily have to secure financing first, but it can help in a lot of ways. It familiarizes you with the process. It'll help you catch any unexpected surprises. When you submit an offer, sellers will often take that offer more seriously if they see that you've been pre-approved. And that can be a major thing because at the time I'm making this video, in 2022, the rural land market is about as hot as I've ever seen it. Like as a market, rural land has been progressively hotter really since the 90s, and COVID set it on fire. Several markets, tracts are selling really quickly, some have multiple offers, and in general, the prices are going up faster than they ever have. Take a look at this. This is a graph of rural land price trends in Texas. Notice anything crazy about the last 2 years? Like maybe the hockey stick on the graph at the very end? Chances are the trend won't continue like that forever, but it does indicate a really hot market. So having your financing ready will make your offer all the more appetizing to the seller. So if you're going to finance, where do you go? Where do you start? I'm going to actually have a complete video on financing rural land. That's going to be able to walk you more specifically through the process. But here are the big bullet points. You do have a couple of options in terms of where do you go to finance that raw land or rural land or a ranch or farm or whatever. But overall, the best lender most of the time will likely be a member of the farm credit system. Now, I don't get any referral dollars for saying that. They're not paying me. But as someone who specializes in rural land transactions, I can tell you that if you're buying several acres or a lot of land, it's typically going to be one of your better options. And just so you know, the farm credit system was established back in 1916 to create liquidity in the agricultural land market, much in the way that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac create liquidity in the home mortgage markets. Today, in the National Farm Credit Network, there's 71 institutions. 11 of those are in Texas, and you can check out their logos right here. Now, each of these institutions are actually member-owned cooperatives, and you can find out a lot more information if you just Google the Texas Farm Credit System. I'll also just note that I have a comprehensive article about this video posted on landassociation.org, so you can go check it out for more information there. But members of the Farm Credit System specialize in rural agricultural land transactions. They know all the nuances of a farm and ranch purchase. They can do things like include equipment in the purchase of the property. And they have a number of resources at your disposal when it comes to these large rural land transactions. Now I will say, if you're going to buy a smaller tract of land, let's say under 10 acres, What I would do if I were you is compare the cost of a loan from one of these Texas Farm Credit lenders to a local lender, like a local bank or a credit union in the county that you're going to buy the land in. I've actually personally done this on a couple of small purchases that I have, and it worked out wonderfully. Generally though, your big bank chains, your national brands are most often not your best solution when it comes to lending on rural land. Plus, the local bank or credit union, as well as some member of the farm credit system, will have local surveyors, local appraisers that will know that land in and out. Whereas big chains, they don't. Okay, step 2, or step 1 for you cash buyers. This is the fun part. You get to go out and find the place of your dreams. Now, if you're watching this video, you no doubt have already been doing this. You've probably got a list of properties you've probably been daydreaming about, but now you get to take action. Now you reach out and you start scheduling showings. Now, there are a couple good websites that are really ideal for going and finding rural land. I personally use HAR, which is the Houston Association of Realtors website, Lands of Texas. I use Zillow, and look, there's dozens of other ones. Like, check them out here. The biggest step into finding the right rural property, farm, or ranch for you, and I'm going to try to say this with as little bias as possible, but get yourself a buyer's agent. And look, I don't care if it's me, but holy moly, this is the biggest no-brainer ever. I know that you, watching this video here, are resourceful because you're watching this video, and you're super smart because you're still watching. But unless you have transacted multiple times with rural land, you just may not know the nuances of the contract or even the market that you're going to be going into, despite the fact that you've been able to see a few listings. The good news is a buyer's agent doesn't cost you a thing. Because remember, in most real estate transactions, the commissions are actually paid by the seller. They're not paid by you, the buyer. So what it means for the listing agent is now that you have a buyer's agent, they're going to have to split that commission between the buyer's agent and the listing agent. And it is important to know that when you contact that listing agent, the listing agent is contractually obligated to serve the interest of the seller, not you. Now, it is common, it happens a lot, where the buyer and the seller work through the same agent. It's called dual agency. And it happens a lot in Texas. But you as the buyer, and hopefully a Landowner TV subscriber, I'm telling you, you should probably go ahead and get yourself a buyer's agent because you're out nothing. And hopefully that buyer's agent is familiar with that local market and the land in that area. Step 3. Okay, so you found the perfect place. You've taken the family approves. This is the place that you really want. Let's talk about step 3, which is the offer and the contract. How do you make an offer on a ranch? And what are the important parts of that contract? If the transaction takes place with a licensed real estate agent, they're going to be using the TREC promulgated contract. TREC being the Texas Real Estate Commission. As a licensed real estate professional in Texas, we are obligated to use a TREC promulgated contract. So it's basically just a contract that we'll use to outline the transaction. The good news is these contracts have been used thousands, if not millions of times for land transactions. And they provide a lot of flexibility to include or disinclude anything that's appropriate for your transaction. Now with the offer itself, the question I get a lot is, how much should I offer? The asking price is X, what should I offer? Well, as I mentioned, the markets do vary. In really hot markets, offers go above asking price. On the flip side, you may have a tract of land with some undesirable feature that's sat on the market for a year and a half, 2 years. Maybe there's an access problem, maybe it's next to a landfill, who knows? So in those instances, I would suggest going in, maybe even below 10%. So it really does vary. The key thing is to get with your buyer's agent who has local knowledge of that market, and they should know what's an appropriate offer for that particular tract of land. We could talk all day about the contract in different ways to change it, to make it best suited for you. But let's focus on some of the key points and move along. I already mentioned financing. Once again, being pre-approved is going to make that offer even stronger to a seller. Minerals. All mineral rights are automatically transferred from the seller to the buyer by using this contract unless they're specifically reserved by the seller. It's important to know that in the state of Texas, the surface rights can be permanently severed from the mineral interest of land. But in Texas, the mineral interest is always the dominant estate. Now there's way more to that subject to cover in this video, but just be aware it's a thing, and you should probably get legal advice if you have specific questions about that. Because, oh, by the way, I am not an attorney. Now let's talk about the option period. The option period will outline a specific number of days that you have to review the property and change your mind if you don't want it. And this period goes between 10 days, sometimes 30 days. Most of the time in rural land, sellers don't like option periods going as far as 30 days. I see 10 days a lot. And I've also seen really strong offers with no option period. There's also the survey that you need to keep in mind. Now I'm going to cover that next, but just be aware who pays for it, that's a thing. The other thing you can negotiate in the contract is the closing costs. Now these costs can include things like the title policy, things like the closing costs to generate your loan, and a few other things, but they can range between 2 and 5% of the overall transaction. So negotiating between who pays for closing can be a major sticking point in a contract, so just be aware. Next is the closing date. More recently in rural transactions, I'm seeing closing dates being pushed out to 45, sometimes 60 days, simply because people aren't able to get surveys or appraisals in time because of just a high demand of those things. So just be aware, although you want to close very quickly, sometimes there are constraints that you really don't have any control of, like getting a survey out there or an appraiser out there in time. Okay, step 4, inspecting the property. Like I just mentioned, after you execute this contract, you'll likely be inside of an option period. This is your chance to even more fully evaluate the property to make sure it's going to suit your needs. Unlike a home purchase, there aren't any licensed land inspectors. That means for raw land like a ranch, it's going to be up to you, a buyer's agent, or sometimes a qualified consultant to go out there and do research on that tract of land. Now as a buyer's agent, I'll pull soils data, floodplain data, vegetative cover info, and a lot of times I'll connect the buyer with a local wildlife biologist or ag expert in the region, once again just to make sure it's going to meet their needs. Whatever you do, do not buy land sight unseen. That's just generally a really bad idea. More on inspecting the property, there are a number of free resources with a ton of really good information that you can utilize to find out even more about your prospective property. First, I'm going to recommend that you go to landassociation.org and read an article that I wrote called 10 Things to Know Before Buying a Piece of Property. And more recently, I posted some information about some of these free online tools that you can use. I actually have links to those articles in the description of this video. But the resources I would recommend are the Texas Railroad Commission, Web Soil Survey, FEMA floodplain maps, and the Texas Water Well website. Step 5 is the survey, and this is a critical part of the transaction because it literally defines what it is that you're buying. Now, surveys on rural land are conducted a bit differently than the survey that was used for your house in the suburban neighborhood. That survey is a lot and block. Most likely the survey method used to define your land is going to be called meets and bounds. Now look, it's nice when the property you're buying comes with a recent survey. In fact, when I buy and sell land on my own, I always make sure that I get a recent survey before I sell it because it's more enticing to the buyer. But if you're looking at a piece of property and you're going to finance it, most likely that lender is going to require a recent survey, which is good because even if you're buying cash, I would get a survey done. And if you're looking to get a title commitment for that property, the title company is going to require a recent survey also. All good reasons to have a survey. Now, rural surveyors have a special credential that I would recommend you make sure they have before they do your survey. What you want as a surveyor is a registered professional land surveyor, an RPLS. Now, this is a challenging accreditation for a surveyor to get. It requires a long apprenticeship, and there's only a finite number of these folks around. I say this because during hot markets, they're hard to come by and they get booked out weeks in advance. Once again, going back to those extended closing periods. The good news is a buyer's agent and likely your lender are going to know a registered professional land surveyor. So step 6, I would say, is title commitments. And even though I put it at step 6, the title commitment really does start early in the process. Usually immediately after that land contract is executed, it's sent over to the local title company. And it usually takes 2 to 3 weeks to receive a title commitment back. So what is a title commitment? Because honestly, when I started this whole process, I didn't know either. A title commitment is a commitment for title insurance. It provides the terms and conditions for the way the final title policy will be issued. And title insurance offers protection for buyers and their lenders from a defined group of defects in the title. One of the main purposes is just to make sure that the person you're buying it from owns that property and the people they bought it from actually owned it before them, and so on. It also goes through things like, and ensures there's no tax liens against the property. In other words, that current buyer hasn't leveraged it for other loans. The IRS isn't wanting it because they haven't paid other taxes, and so on. There are a number of other items that these policies insure against, but they're very specialized. And once again, you're going to have to look at your specific title policy. Okay, step 7 is closing. You're here. At this point, you will hopefully have checked all the boxes with your lender. You'll have checked all the boxes with your title company. And you will have provided that title company all of the items scheduled in Title C of that title commitment. The only thing now is left to close. That means you and the seller will sign over title. You'll finalize all your financial agreements, and you're going to sign about 50 pages of things, so just get ready with that writing hand. Once again, I really hope this video was helpful. I'm sure you have questions remaining. There are a lot of things I just didn't have time to cover in this video. The good news is I'm going to continue producing content for you to make you smarter about your land, to make you smarter about these transactions. And look, if you have any specific questions, be sure to put them in the description below. I'll be happy to answer them. I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks.